Well, we'll start with Sue. We know a little bit about the micro businesses, but specifically, we want to hear about sections 11 and section 11, I guess, in H 159, which I have a feeling your hands have been involved with up to date. So, welcome and tell us what is happening in section 11.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. For the record, I'm Sue Minter, the Executive Director of Capstone Community Action, and we are one of 5 community action agencies creating the network we call VCAP, the Vermont Community Action Program. And with me is my colleague and friend from Bennington and Rutland, Tom Donahue, who is the Director of Brock Community Action. And I would also like to introduce our staff from Capstone, Liz Scharf, who is the Micro Business Program Director here at Capstone and works closely with the network of CAP Micro Business Development Program administrators. So yes, I think you know not only that our program supports low-income, sort of at-risk businesses that we would talk about as the area median, state area median, 80% or less. So we do business entrepreneurship as both an economic stimulus program and an anti-poverty program, because our work is directed to a particular constituency. And we do one-on-one counseling. And because of your great support in the year 2020, we've really exponentially increased our ability to deliver services and to get money into the hands of these folks who really needed it to survive. And now we believe need again to actually recover and bounce forward. So I have to admit that I'm not following section by section, but I know that we are asking for 2 things. Essentially, we want to increase the base funding for our micro business development program by $200,000. And I want to just mention for a moment that before COVID, we had been relying on a very minimal program support from the state, which we use to leverage other dollars, some federal dollars, but mostly philanthropic dollars that we all have to raise. But we, that one time for 3 years, we've had $100,000 one-time investment to our base. That went away in the last year, but instead, we were able to benefit greatly from the stimulus program that you really helped make possible we call it Embrace. So that has been focused on getting grants very quickly into the hands, just like your other stimulus programs, but the folks we serve really weren't eligible for those larger, even small business programs that you know a lot about. So the reason I mention that is that we want to go back to what we were living on before, plus another $100,000. Now, you should know that that base funding doesn't cover even each of our agencies to have one FTE, but we leverage other funds to piece it all together. So for us, the $200,000 request into our base helps sustain the base program that we've been providing. In addition, we want to, again, have an extra stimulus program to get grants to folks, and we're requesting $2 million for that program. In the year 2020, we put out the door very quickly, first $1 million and then another $2 million, and collectively, we served 436 businesses in a very short period of time to keep them going. We have confidence, especially with the longer timeline, that we can do this again and that it is greatly needed, not only for the businesses we know about, but for helping us to start new businesses. Of course, post-recession, post-pandemic, we are going to need to have businesses increase. We need startups. That's what we do for the moderate to low income folks that we serve. And this opportunity for entrepreneurship is literally self-sufficiency. It keeps them out of all of the subsidies that low-income people depend on. So those are the two key pieces I think that I wanted to cover. I want to offer the floor to Tom Donahue, and I want to recognize that, you know, we work as a network, the 5 community action agencies. And in this program, which has been incredible amount of work, administrative work, getting all these checks out, it's really Brock has taken the leadership role and have tremendous staff, dedicated, wonderful outcomes. So Tom, congrats and thanks for sharing what you want to share and anything I may have missed.
Okay, before we get to Tom, let me just ask a couple of questions. So the $200,000 is basically for community action staff to administer the program?
Yes.
Okay, and the $3 million that you got, it sounds like you got $3 million in Embrace. Well, let me back up. We're only getting $100,000 in base funding. Was there any support for grants for these startup businesses? Do they have to find their own money?
Well, we help them, and Liz can speak to this. And just to clarify, it was 100,000 on top of a base of 293, I think, thousand. So
Okay.
again, it was just sort of getting us to go. But generally, our work is really that counseling, but we don't have money to give out cash like this in our normal program. We connect them with lenders. We help them establish credit. We help them get loans and finance their dreams. We help them develop the programs or their business planning. But until this Embrace program, the stimulus dollars, we've not been able to give grants like this.
So is the Embrace program, the way I understood you had $3 million to date, and now you're looking for an additional 2 million? Is that correct?
Apparently, I'm saying that wrong. It was $1 million and $1 million.
Yes, a million and a million.
So we had, you first allocated $1 million and we got it out the door within 3 months. And that included getting the money from the state to us, to 200 some odd businesses. And then because you had more money to give out, you gave out us another $1 million, which again, we delivered. All of that money was spent.
Okay.
So we would like to start now with the 2 million. And I want to mention that there is also 500,000 for this purpose already passed in 315. Is it H or Senate 315? The bill that's already passed.
H 315.
So now we're at your next bill, and we're saying we'd like to get 2 million more. We think we can deliver 2.5 million, and we'd like the 200,000 more in our base.
Okay. Do you have any metrics on, like, a report of who you gave the money to, the size of the grants, how many recipients, all that stuff that you can send us in writing?
Absolutely. We have an extensive report with testimonials from all of these businesses. Yes.
Okay.
And the communities that they serve, because this is growing the micro business program on steroids, which we have loved and has been base funded at about $1 million for the last several years. And this reaches so many of the communities we are wanting to reach, not just low income, but BIPOC and women. And I mean, it really is a cross communities investment.
Do these businesses also access some of the more traditional recovery grants?
No.
Generally, no. I think Liz can testify to that with the direct assistance that she's been working with. But in general, they don't qualify. And to the senator's point, 62% of the folks are female or BIPOC. 39 have children living at home. A lot of this is self-sufficiency, self-employment, maybe one additional employee, but absolutely essential to keep people out of poverty and out of the state subsidy programs that, generally the people we serve. This is really about getting people out of poverty, not just serving them, but it also starts businesses and creates jobs and taxes.
Good. Okay, we'll hear from Tom briefly. We're going to need to move on to another witness, but I think it's exciting and we have a good picture. And once we get the written material, that should help flesh.
And Michael, if you can't see her, Karen also has her hand up.
Very briefly, Karen, hi.
Hi, Karen Lafayette for Vermont Community Action Partnership. I just wanted to clarify one thing. In H315, when you passed that, we added something to the section. The previous grants we've gotten were strictly for businesses that were affected by COVID. They were not for new startups. And you added language, as did the House, and accepted a language that would add new startups to the money. And the language was, and for new businesses started by individuals who have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic through layoffs, furloughs, reduced hours, or due to being employed in an industry that had been severely affected. So this 2 million that the House sent to you in 159 does not allow for new startups, which we do want to add that language or use the language from 315 in that section.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Tom, please, welcome.
Thank you, Senator. Yeah, the first thing I wanted to do is let Senator Ballant know that, yes, I did ride my motorcycle to work last Friday.
Oh, she'll be happy to hear that.
Yeah, I won't be riding it this Friday. Anyway, listen, everything that's been said here is right on. I just want to reiterate and strengthen that conversation by saying, you know, this is a critical part of the economic response to COVID. This is part of the relief, but it's part of the previous portion we did, which was amazing. We served 436 businesses with this funding. 82% of those said that they might not have stayed in business had we not provided these $5,000 relief grants. Now, that is critical information because these are the lifeblood of Vermont at this level. These businesses are 5 employees and smaller. But keep in mind, last time I testified to Senate Economic Development, I was testifying with Bill Cherry. And Bill was the founder of Switchback Brewery in Chittenden County. And he started as a man that qualified income-wise through my colleague's department up there, Jan Demers up in Burlington, and with one man and one great skill for making beer, and sold the company to his employees with 30 employees and $1 million payroll. So, you know, these micro businesses, yes, they're small, they're 5 and fewer, including the owner. But you never know which one's going to be the next Switchback Brewery either. So, you know, we've got to plant these seeds, but the success of this program, and I want to reiterate, you know, this is my background. I was economic development director for the city of Rutland back in the Wenberg administration. And then I spent the last 2 decades running the Chamber of Commerce before I was fortunate enough to be welcomed into the community action world, which I'll never look back. I love what we do. And this is part of our 2-pronged approach, which is crisis, helping people with assistance in crisis and of low income and those living in poverty, and helping to alleviate that poverty or lift them out of poverty with the 2nd prong, which is the economic or sustainable path forward. And this micro business development program is a huge success story. And I'm saying that based on my history in economic development, which dates back almost 3 decades in Vermont. And I can tell you that this is an envy of other programs. Now, I worked with Reddick. I've been on the Economic Development Board of Directors and the SBDC. They work well with us. They're not in competition, but they oftentimes are stretched too and refer these micro businesses and this interest in developing a micro business, someone with a proclivity towards something that they're good at naturally, or have a hobby or a passion that they turn into a successful business. And we've done that. So this year alone, as a micro business development department at Brock Community Action, as an example, in Bennington and Rutland County, this year, and this is where the 200,000 would go, keep in mind that's divided by 5. So every number we ask for, divide by 5, but it's efficient and effective because we've got a network of 5 organizations covering the entire state of Vermont, and that's efficient. Even the RDCs have 11, the planning commissions have 11, the chambers are in dozens. We do it with 5. And this microbusiness development department in Bennington and Rutland at Broad Community Action is working with 93 people right now. And we've already leveraged over $250,000 in capital investment, outside money coming into these businesses, $250,000 so far this fiscal year. So the program in itself is an amazing success, coming, wearing my former business hat. But your investment, and I think you guys need to take credit when you're talking to your constituents to say, what have you done during COVID? What have you done to on this path forward and get us out of this economic situation that we're finding ourselves in? And you should be talking about this program. So I want to encourage you to go to our website that was created through that last round, MBDP, Microbusiness Development Program, mbdp.org. Everything that you're asking us is on that website, and it's amazing to see the Vermonters, and there are hundreds of testimonials talking about their successful business and how this funding, this Embrace funding they provided, now that's the $2 million now I'm talking about, that we're looking for, has assisted them in getting them through this languishing pandemic that we're in. And it's hammering businesses, but this $5,000 to a micro business is like giving $50,000 to a small business. Everything's relative in Vermont. And you got to keep that in mind. This is a small amount of money in the big picture, but really not for these businesses of that size struggling to make ends meet to get through this. And this is part of the path forward. So if we're able to do another round of this, keeping in mind, we served 436 businesses in the last 2 rounds that you gave us these funding. We got this money out the door in the hands of Vermont businesses that needed it desperately, and we did it efficiently and effectively. And now we want that opportunity to do it again with the economic path forward. And this will allow them to not only be able to move forward with a new business that has not received any funding, but we'd like to be able to revisit the first group. And then this third element that we think is really important is to help those that have become unemployed because of COVID or furloughed, lost their jobs, or maybe lost their business. We hope not. But that have that opportunity now to shift gears and say, okay, now I want to pursue my passion. I want to go into self-employment. And as Sue Minter aptly pointed out, I mean, 62% of everybody we served was either female or minority-owned business. I mean, we're hitting a demographic that is not being served by my constituents, who I have a lot of respect for. So I'm not disparaging them in any way. The economic development corporations, the SBDCs, do great work, but there's never enough of them altogether to really start these businesses holistically or comprehensively, I should say.
So you're
but this piece plugs us in to be able to do that one area of this very small business. And one of the reasons we're successful at it is because people trust us. They're used to coming to community action organizations and turning to us because they're of lower income and they trust us. We've built a rapport with the folks in our towns throughout the state with these 5 organizations. So we have a niche and we can serve them. And this is an opportunity. We won't let you down, but if you go to mbdp.org, you will see the success.
Can you say that more slowly? Because I put in the wrong letters. I did not.
So M.
Yep.
B.
B.
D.
D.
P.
P. Okay.
.org.
So my question for you, Tom, is you're now giving out, or you're giving out $2 million. You want to give out $2 million more. Where would I find the eligibility criteria for that grant, the amount of that grant, the oversight, auditing of that grant? Do you have more demand than that money can accommodate now? And how do you select who gets money and who doesn't?
Yeah, so I don't think that they're, so first of all, let me harken back to your first several questions are all at mbdp.org. So it's all there documented, everything that you just asked. But demand, So when we got the first million out, we didn't know if we could do a second million, but we are shocked. I'm shocked anyway, as a former economic development director, at how many micro businesses are actually out there in Vermont. They operate pretty quietly, but they're doing their thing in every town across the state. Hundreds and hundreds of them, probably in the thousands. So they're learning about this program because part of what we're doing is promoting it to say, and by the way, as a quick aside, they've created their own network. And this month, hosted by my guy, Tyler Jokinen, he hosts a network opportunity. I said, you guys are going to replace the Chamber of Commerce that I work so hard to build down here. They are putting together their own micro business network. And now they're going on Zoom, at least at the moment, and networking amongst each others in these opportunities that they're doing monthly. It's impressive stuff that's happening.
Well, and we're all employing them in different capacities, whether it's a window washing company or a IT help at home company or a house cleaning company. I mean, tons of
Hair. Don't forget about your hair.
Oh, my hair. That is a micro business. It's a microclimate and it's a micro whatever.
But salons, dog groomers, so many folks that are, and I think I want to just, if I could, point out that this is really about equity. These are not people who have necessarily relationships with lending institutions. They don't really get served by the SBDCs because they may have way more to address than their desire to start a business. And we also do financial coaching, helping people understand budgeting, helping people establish debt, get out loans. And then we also have a whole other slew of programs, whether it's our volunteer income tax program, and of course the programs that workforce development programs, and the programs that really meet people in crisis. So we are a holistic service agency serving people in poverty and getting people out of poverty. So I just wanted to mention that there are a lot of challenges our folks have that we're there to counsel them for years in many cases. And maybe that helps them not only get a business, get off of reach up, and maybe even get their own home. The stories of life transformation that we also could share are really another point to why this is important.
Okay, so Tom, could you just go through the basic eligibility requirements?
So my guy is Tyler Jokinen, and he's my expert on this. And I haven't been involved in the program at that level personally. And normally it's the Tom and Tyler show. Tyler isn't with us today, but Liz, but Liz is Tyler's counterpart. So if you wouldn't mind, Senator, I was just going to ask Liz to chime in there.
Okay, I'm just looking, before we have to move on to our next witness, I want to know, is there an income criteria? Is there a business plan criteria? Is there, what are the criteria if someone comes in and says, I want $5,000?
So this is Liz Sharp from Capstone Community Action, Director of Community Economic Development and Food Security. In terms of the eligibility requirements, it's 80% of median income to be qualified for this program. And that's based on the family size. For the previous $2 million that we gave out, they had to be a registered business with the state. So they already had to have been a micro business. And as Tom mentioned, it's 5 or fewer employees, including the owner. The vast majority of the people that we worked with were sole entrepreneurs. So it was just basically one person, or perhaps one plus an employee or two. What Karen mentioned was that for this next round, we really would like to be able to offer grants to those who, since COVID, have started to build a business. So they weren't necessarily in business when COVID started, but they're in business now and they're new businesses. So we'd really, and we're working. I just looked at my report from last month, and we are helping people start new businesses, and to be able to give them an extra boost with this grant would be an incredible opportunity for those new businesses.
Liz, could you just chime in about the Secretary of State? If we registered with the Secretary of State by a certain date, this was how we worked the previous program. or their tax returns? What were those criteria? That's the part
Right.
that-
So like tax return. So one of the things is that, and this was mentioned, is that a lot of these businesses hadn't had access to other grants because either one, they didn't make a profit in their business, so that they didn't, qualify for any money. They could have applied, but they really wouldn't have gotten anything because they showed no profit. That doesn't mean that they didn't bring in money for their families. They just weren't able to show a profit. And so for the Embrace, we didn't require that people had tax returns in order to apply for the program. But we did need to, see that they were registered with the state as a business. And I think we'd still like to keep that, because I have to say, like right now is tax season, and the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. We at Capstone have worked with over 1,500 people doing taxes right now. Many of them are micro businesses. And so, we are, and some of them, literally, a lady just the other day came in, she hadn't filed her taxes in 8 years, and she was a business, right? Wondering how much she was going to get for Social Security. And, those are scary things to be talking about with someone who's 66 years old and has been running a business and not doing their taxes. So we'd like to keep that parameter in, that someone doesn't have to show, last year's tax return in order to qualify for the program. But we do make sure, and there's a vetting process. There's at least 2 of us who are looking at the grant, and then Brock's Finance is also looking at the grant application to make sure that the person does qualify in terms of having a registered business. Yes, Karen.
And
You wanna add to
is there a oversight by OEO of this grant money
Yes.
to make sure that it's being?
Yeah, I was about to say that OEO, who oversees our micro business development program and has since 1988, or at least that's as long as we've been running it, they continue to oversee our work on a number of fronts, including this. So that is the overseeing body.
Okay.
Karen,
Okay, I'm gonna try and wind this up if I can.
Michael, Karen just had, I think, one more thing.
Just one thing in reference to your comment, Mr. Chairman. I do know that one of the things that we have that is different is that we have that technical assistance to be with that person one-on-one to not only apply for the funding, but I think Tyler will tell you that every single expenditure that they are going to use the $5,000, the $25,000 to $5,000 for is something that is reviewed by the business counselors and either accepted or rejected. So there's a lot of overseeing and technical support for these people to make sure that they're spending that small amount of money on something that is going to be very helpful to them. So it has a lot of oversight and a lot of technical assistance and a lot of review on where the expenditures are going, unlike some of the other grant programs.
Okay. Thank you all very much. It's good
Thank you,
work.
Senator.
It's
We'll
exciting.
follow up with all the
Thank you,
information you
Senators.
asked for.
Great.
Okay,
And
great.
we now know MDB.org.
Micro Business Development Program.
But we got it. Listen,
I
this
put it in the chat. It's a good website.
great champions of micro business. We have it in our DNA.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. We're going to move on to David Bradbury. And we may go over about 5 minutes, but we're 5 minutes behind schedule right now. And Senator Clark, so we have a agenda planning meeting. I hope you could attend after.
Yes, I have returned from Senate Transportation.
Okay, the very last section of H-159, I think, is section 13. We certainly know about this request from previous sessions. So I'm just going to turn it over to David and give us the background and what you're asking for.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is David Bradbury, for the record. I serve as the president of Vermont Center for Emerging Technologies. We are the manager of the Vermont Seed Capital Fund. I also am a former economic development deputy commissioner, been president of the Vermont Technology Council and a few other things in the startup world as a private investor and an entrepreneur. Thank you for the opportunity to come in. Posted to the committee's page is an overview on VSET and the seed fund, sort of a long PowerPoint that if you'd like to reference. I don't plan on running through all that just to save you all having to hear this story from me over and over. I first came to the committee in March of last year, just before the governor proposed $10 million to the Vermont Seed Capital Fund for recapitalization as part of, I think it was phase 2 recovery or something. That led into an issue around qualification with the source of funds. That spring, we thought we found a solution, but then by then there was more impetus and incentives for funding other areas, like those micro programs that were just preceding me. For what it's worth, that stuff works really, really well. So, okay, if I had a vote, I would say give that a real look because it does work and it's foundational for entrepreneurship.
Yep.
in Vermont.
We love them.
And then over the summer, we're invited back in September to talk about that phase 2 of the CRF funds for recapitalization. And at that point, I think in committee, we were discussing a $5 million allocation toward recapitalization. So at that point, we assembled about 300 signatures through a petition from across Vermont on people that wanted this. You've been inundated over the last 12 months with letters from founders sharing their stories of predatory pricing, pulled term sheets, access to equity, right? The first check writers that enable all this other debt that's abundant. It's the obvious next step after you've gotten technical assistance, which has surged into our Vermont market like never before. So it remains a gap. And right. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come into the House Commerce Committee this year through sort of more normal course of business, and then to be back here today. So what we're seeking, we continue to keep a running list, right, of about 100 companies that are actively looking for early stage equity, either to start their business, to save their business, or to meet excess demand from sort of accelerated things. These are people that make accessory dwellings, these homes for the backyard or attached to your house. It's telehealth, it's software, certain consumer goods and services. So it really is across the board where demand is. Doesn't mean everybody sort of rises to the level of wanting sort of equity investing, or that has a business that shows a path toward how do we get this back into the fund. And just for grounding purposes, the seed fund was created really in this committee through the leadership of key senators like Hinda Miller at the time, Tim Ash, Vince Lizzie, and Lord, some of you may have been there. I apologize, it's so long ago. But that was 2009 and 10. And that was really a moment where we said, Vermont needs to do this because no one else is doing it. And what we've done over those years, we've proven that one-time requests, right? We really mean it. So we come back, what's this, 12 to 13 years later, to say, if you want to do more, we're ready. We're audited, we're proven, our leverage on capital for every dollar we invest, we've shown $8 coming alongside of us initially, which is really exciting. And then that capital leverage grows to 42, 43 times over the course of a company's life. So we know the model works. We've been cash poor this is the second full year of that. So not really making new investments, but we still are able to help companies syndicate and find other investors, or also tell them not to go and find outside investors, get them a customer, right, or access a grant. So again, still very active, but based upon the needs in the community today, at this early level, we feel there's an opportunity to come make our case. And we think $5 million in fresh money allows us to make 40 or so new investments over the next 2 years. It allows us to give time for our current investments to repatriate or to revolve back into the fund, right? We've done 23 investments from this fund. And when we presented our case back in 2009, 2010, we said we're going to do 16. So we've been able to show that it comes back and we can put it back out. So I think I want to leave ample time for questions too, but our key numbers that I look at is that if Vermont wants to grow stability, vibrancy in communities, increase the tax base, grow wealth and income for all sorts of sectors and individuals, then entrepreneurship is the solution. It is our business model, in my view. Our portfolio reports $68,000 average wages. I know that's low because a lot of people to report put zero in because they're founders and are taking pay. So we know these are really great jobs. They're over $35 an hour. That's kind of the equivalency just as a proxy. And that this $4.3 million that we've invested from this fund has levered $183 million in other dollars. These are companies from the university. We have such demand with the people that have arrived over COVID and through sort of come to Vermont programs that are now trying to create businesses here and are looking for a friendly face to perhaps be their first check, all right, or to work with them on funding. So I think we're ready. We used general funds before for this. I think we're ideally set up for one-time general fund appropriations. We can work with whatever source as you all go through the sausage making of putting all the pieces together every year. But I'll just leave it at that and maybe take some questions and have a discussion here. But as you all know, I truly believe in this. This tech-enabled sector is ripe to solve our problems and somehow put 10 or 12,000 of these sort of structurally unemployed people back to work through upskilling, through current positions that are available. And it's at high probability, low risk, and a proven partner. We are not a startup program ourselves. And I'll leave it at that.
And David, may I just ask a question? It's great to see you and great to have you back. And thank you for all your work on this. I know the Seed Capital Fund was meant to be a revolving fund, right? So I guess my question is, how has it not rejuvenated itself? I mean, why? I guess in my naivete, I had thought that through all these successes, 23 companies that are up and running and doing reasonably well, why is it not revolving back into the fund enough so that you don't need us anymore?
Yeah, great question. So originally in the fund, VSET put $1 million in, and then the state put in 4.1 million through a couple of tranches. Okay, so we've got long-term skin in the game. And a couple things have happened. One, investments have failed. This is a really risky asset class, right? And we all go into this eyes open that there are no guarantees. During the COVID year, we were impacted. We had one sale pending that would have been quite spectacular. And then we had another sort of recapitalization in a portfolio company that would have let us continue on. So the revolving, from my lens, is working. We're just in a holding pattern. And what we're finding here, Senator, is, unlike sort of these hot money markets where you put money in and you become a unicorn and 3 years later, everybody gets a windfall. That's not the Vermont way. It's not the Vermont entrepreneur, right? And what we're seeing is that it's 7 to 10 years, all right, for holding an investment until there's some sort of opportunity for payback. And again, that might be them taking out a loan, paying off investors. It could be a sale of the company. And most of the sales have been very good for Vermont. It's not like they sell in blast off places. So
but
really the other thing is we've all done our jobs really well. There are more people that want entrepreneurship and to start companies than ever before. The college programs are linked, these innovation hubs at Due North and Brick and Lightning Jar and the Mint and VSET and Generator, that all has sort of helped educate this population of risk taker and entrepreneurs. So that, and we've seen the ability of the internet and e-commerce and the rest from remote places remove barriers to reach markets. So the demand is bigger than ever before. And that, quite frankly, has me freaked out because they're going to find the money and they're going to find a location. And I want all of them to stay here if we can.
Right. So would you just be kind enough to remind me what the trigger is? At what point does it trigger a return to the seed fund that a company has to send money back to the seed fund?
Yeah, there is no hard and fast trigger. There are sort of soft incentives because we're generally one of many investors. We're a minority investor because at least our philosophy is the entrepreneurs need to control the company, right? If so, it's not like a loan that says come back after 5 or 7 years. So it's really dependent. And again, that's part of the conversation on going into an investment is trying to understand what the objectives are of the founders and the other team members.
That sounds pretty squishy to me.
Yeah, it's puzzling to me because, for our down payment assistance program, for example, I mean, there's a very specific trigger that sends money back into it as a revolving fund, which is the sale of the house. So if they get help on the initial down payment as a first-time homeowner, they then, when they sell the house, that they get the fund gets a percent back of that sale. So there's no trigger that.
Well, the sale of a company would be the trigger.
Right, but before that, that may not sell. It may continue to grow and flourish.
And they may sell and continue to grow and flourish. No, but there generally is. I mean, our documents generally have some redemption provisions. So after 5-7 years, and again, this is something that's negotiated with others. If you put $50,000 into a company that's raised $2 or $3 million, you can have some say, but you don't dictate terms. And really the higher order need was to try to leverage other capital, right? Other capital to come in, because we know 80% of early stage capital goes to payroll and people and consultants and things like that. So, but no, when there's an event, a change of control, or the company wants to, we have one prospectively now that was delayed by COVID, which is that situation. It's been like, hey, we've been in here 9-10 years. We got to put this money to work for the next couple companies as an investor class. And so that's happening. That's ongoing.
I get that, but this is taxpayer money. I mean, this is public money that we're putting into high risk private business. So I guess that's one of my concerns, that there isn't sort of you're right. It may not be a lot of money, but it is different type of money than just private equity. It's public, and we have an accountability issue here that we have to obviously deal with. So I guess I'd ask for what you might consider an appropriate trigger for return to the revolving fund, because I think from a public accountability, we need to have that, I think, for this next round of investment in the seed capital fund. And I may be speaking out of turn, but just as I think through this with public money, I think that would be appropriate.
The current fund is federal monies, right? That were the originating sources for this. So the goal here, though, was how do we get $200 million in early stage capital in with only investing $4 or $5 million? That was sort of the objective. Okay. And in order to do that, you have to play well with others, right? The fund's capital needs to be at market terms with Google Ventures, or well, that's not a name anymore, but formerly Google Ventures or corporations. And if we're so much of an outlier, then the fund would only be able to invest by itself, right? No one would want to commingle funds. And that's really the challenge, right? It's not that we don't want the money back and have it revolve. We've proven that works and have done it. The issue is around timing, but also what the objectives are of the entrepreneur. And I don't view it as squishy. I mean, there are 200, 300 pages of documents that sort of dictate how decisions are made and what happens. But it really is more of a matter of, do we think more capital is needed at the early stage? I have a list of companies, and we've got all this experience that tells us yes. If you can put down the first $50,000 or $100,000, you're going to get another $800,000 or $900,000 around, and that allows someone to realize their potential as they define it, where they define it. And I think that's critical. And I'll go back to a failed company we're involved in, Senator, down in Woodstock. They would not have gotten that round of finance close had it not been for our first $150,000 commitment.
Right.
And it went on 6 or 7 years. We had 17 people at Point working above Bentleys, right? Yeah. And ultimately didn't work out, but the amount of payroll that was created and taxes paid on that alone more than made up for our lost equity. So
No, I still mourn the loss of that company
yeah.
and all the people we lost as a result.
Yeah.
Who moved out of state.
With respect to accountability, I mean, we're audited. We share those. We have all sorts of structures and places, but we also need to realize we're in the private sector, involved with very sophisticated companies and highly competitive markets. So that's sort of where we've established trust and some expertise that the founders seek out. So
one thing that I would raise at this point is the issue of return on investment. And as you look at the companies that have started, at least in part as a result of the seed capital fund, each of those companies presumably is producing a payroll, is producing payroll taxes, is adding employment to our employment rolls, and we invest in this in a number of ways. And one of the questions I think that has been raised here today is how does your organization and the seed capital fund in particular demonstrate to the public, to us, that it is returning on its investment. And the more that you're able to capture statistics that show some of those indirect things, in other words, this business wouldn't happen had it not been for the seed fund. And as a result of it happening, these are the number of people employed. This is the tax revenue that they generate to the state. This is the other revenue that they generate indirectly. I think that is one of the ways that you demonstrate the value of what you're doing. It's not just what happens to the entrepreneur of that particular corporation. And the extent to which you're able to report back, as you do periodically when you visit to committees such as this, what that is, I think that's one of the best ways to demonstrate your value.
I wholeheartedly agree. Each fall, or I guess September, October, we put out a public stakeholders report, right? That sums up sort of the grounding of the fund, the objectives. And I will say we have 4 objectives in this fund. And that's unlike a private fund or a private investor. Our objectives are returns sufficient to revolve the fund forward, okay? Not to try to maximize return. Number 2 is capital leverage, because again, that was the problem, and it is the problem again for the reasons I cited earlier. Number 3 was total payroll creation. And this fund has supported over almost $50 million now in Vermont payroll, right, through the years. And then the 4th element was other, right? This allowed us to look and say, okay, what are we trying to do through the policy, through the Seed Fund Advisory Board interactions, that maybe we want to focus on a resource or a sector or a college tie, or we put a lot of effort into women founded and operated businesses, right? We're doing more on BIPOC and veteran owned. So, that is, and how you blend those 4 characteristics, those 4 objectives over time, and then pair that with who is in the market looking for money at that time, right? That's where we try to demonstrate really strategic need and use of these funds. So, but we can do a better job on making the statistics or the payback more available. I mean, again, we track capital leverage, return toward break even, right? We track payroll creation, and then some of these other kind of numbers. And our numbers are really the envy of our peers around the country.
So David, you've gotten $5.1 million between raising money, I don't know, from your own organization and from the state. How much has come back into this revolving loan fund?
How much has come back? Let's see. How much has been returned in? I'll look at that number there, but we've invested 4.1 million, 4.3 and change out the door. Each year there's a $100,000 management fee, right, charged to the fund that came out of that original amount. That's how VSET subsidizes operating this sort of public mission fund. And then, currently there's about 300,000, I would say, in dry powder available. And, we're trying to, the last couple of years, we've done smaller investments. Doesn't mean we've stopped the leverage, but with others. But again, there's just more. Demand is off the charts. It's quality demand. And I think it's terribly exciting.
I guess I'm concerned with the terminology revolving capital fund. And I'm not hearing where the revolving comes in.
Sure. Three instances where we have taken capital back from a company at a gain and put it back into the general pool for reinvestment.
And
Okay.
how much is that totaled?
Let's see. The first investment returned $450,000. Again, these are, I need to go look up some of the others. The other returned $150,000. The other, so there's probably been close to $800,000 in money that has returned when it was situationally appropriate for the company, because we would never want to, exercise some clause in a contract that would put a company out of business or cause some undue behavior, right? A forced sale or something. So
what does the term evergreen mean?
Yeah, evergreen is the same as revolving. And the idea is the money doesn't leave. It comes back, and it comes back over time. And then we continue the mission and continue filling the need. And that's what these are. So the two capital contributions into the fund, where there's two investors, VSET and VITA as a proxy for the state funds. And
Right.
those are permanent contributions of capital. So if a big windfall comes back, that money stays in, and we go do a lot more investing under the rules and structure of the seed fund and the operating agreements we have.
And you started out by saying something that caught my fancy because I'm interested in them a lot. You said this money could be used to develop an accessory apartment. How is this different than myself wanting to build a granny apartment and going to a bank to get a second mortgage?
We wouldn't finance you. We'd finance the company that's doing these here in Vermont.
Oh, somebody who is in the business of promoting multiple accessory apartments?
Yeah. So, and actually, Julie Lineberger with WheelPad has written the committee, and her information was with public records. So, I know she's talked with Senator Balin. Her company WheelPad does these very awesome roll-up units. They're originally for folks that were in wheelchairs for permanent or temporary reasons. They've been used to sort of bring loved ones home from nursing home centers during COVID. And her problem during COVID is she got more orders than she could fill, and didn't qualify for economic recovery grants, for example. So, that was one of those cases in March and April and now. And so, to your point, housing is a absolute crisis. I had three entrepreneurs on Tuesday this week tell me, I made 4 offers. I'm hiring 20 people this year. I made 4 offers. They accepted. Then they came up here and looked at housing, and now they're not going to take the jobs. Right. So, by my lens, that falls in that other category. When we look at our 4 objectives, like, where do we move the needle? Okay. And it might take the form of looking to invest in a meat processing plant, right? That was a bottleneck for food systems. It could be helping to fund some of these accessory dwelling unit companies that are trying to provide infill capacity, right, for new beds that meet zoning requirements and can be great businesses as well. So, that's where our relationships, we worked with 300 people last year at VSET, one-on-one, entrepreneurs. These are cancer researchers down to students, down to people trying to come off public subsidy. So, but we have a couple housing models and a couple housing companies that are based here but are selling across the country. And we like to keep those jobs here and solve 2 problems if we can.
Right.
But so I guess where I'm having trouble with this is it sounds like a useful economic development tool targeted towards a narrow niche. Doesn't sound very much like a loan program or a revolving loan program to me. It sounds like more like a grant program to get these businesses going. And until there's a requirement that's tied to, an enforceable requirement that's tied to when a business gets to some threshold of profitability or whatever, that they have to start paying back the grant, we're going to be in a situation where we put $5 million in, and 10 years down the road, you're going to be asked for another $5 million in because no one's paid you back. And it's just a grant program. It may be a good grant program, but why are we labeling it a revolving evergreen loan program where there's no mechanism to get the money back unless it seems right to, I don't know whether it's the entrepreneur or the VSET board, but it doesn't sound like there's any hard and fast way to keep this money regenerating itself.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you, but I don't view it that way. These are long-term commitments that, again, if we want to invest with other people, we need to be part of equity investing practices and can't be an outlier, or it won't be an
let's give them a grant. If we're going to invest and we want the money back, let's give them a loan. If we want to invest with other people, let's take a percentage of the business.
Well, that's what we do. We do get ownership in the business. So, and again, the specific.
I did not understand that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So let's an example. Northern Reliability, the battery storage company that did the State House project down there. We are investors in there. We've been in there for now, I think it's 8 years. We're the largest outside investor in that. And in addition to money, this isn't a fund it and forget it. Like, we're on the boards, we're finding employees, we're trying to find customers. Like, it is a contact sport sort of relationship throughout. So that's the difference between a grant. And that has allowed us to participate and co-invest with all sorts of other qualified entities, again, that bring their own special help to a company in a situation. So,
is it fair to say that effectively what you're doing, you're a venture capital investor? As with the other venture capital investors who are involved, you have an ownership stake in the companies in which you invest. And if they are particularly successful, you share in that success. And then with the share of that success, you reinvest it in the fund to go to other companies. Is that a fair way of describing what you do?
It's more than fair. It's 100% accurate. With one caveat, we've been a social investor, an impact investor before that term was even invented, because our lens isn't necessarily to own the most of the company, right? To be overly aggressive. And we have used these sort of public dollars, back to the chairman's remarks, to help shape deal terms so that they weren't predatory, number one, onerous, or out of market, so that they couldn't raise money from other factors. And I think that's a role that is really important if we did nothing else, just that alone.
Let me just ask a question, if I can, though, along those lines. In the event that you have a company that either does an IPO or otherwise sells part of the investor capital, particularly part of the investment that comes from others, do we prioritize how money comes back to us, or is it at least equal or proportional to what might come back from others?
It would depend on what particular security we had. So we're generally blended in with 3 other investors into an equity round. So we would have to participate just like others. Again, when we set this up, there are no successful models at this sort of layer of capital investing that if you jump in front of everybody else, right, that works. People don't want your money. Their incentives are misaligned. Other co-investors don't want you there. So that was a choice, and it has worked. We're really just in a timing issue for recapitalization, and we're at a timing issue when we're suffering through pandemic, when we have more people wanting capital now that are here in Vermont than ever before, the follow-on, the sort of later stage capital is abundant because there's national networks, there's large local players, but those willing to take a risk on someone who walks in that's been working hard and she says, I want to go for it. I'm ready. Will you be my first $50,000 or $100,000 investor? And you know what? If we can say yes, we will, and then we'll go work with her and her team, and we'll go find the others to get to some critical mass and give it a go. And I'm just saying, you know, the people that we're saying no to right now is heartbreaking because they're the ones of the future. They're creating these jobs and businesses that are robotics, it's batteries, it's housing units, and all the rest. And I hope many of them can make it, but they all scream universally. They want it to be a little bit easier. And that's where, again, you know, when I look at all this capital infrastructure and infrastructure investments through these one-time monies in the state, I view this seed layer as capital infrastructure that has a proven record of good. It's managed well. We've got partners, co-investors, reputation, other supports through VSET and our partners that's ready to scale. And I did something the other day, and I'll leave it at that, you know, if we took $2 billion in this sort of federal money and we reduced it down to $100, right? We're asking for a quarter, 25 cents, right? That's 5 million to 2 billion. So 25 cents to 100. And that helped me realize that, you know, is this egregious to ask? Depends. Is this necessary and needed in the market? Absolutely. And, you know, we're going to get up tomorrow and next week and continue to do our job. But, you know, no offense to the representative, to the senator from Chittenden County, but, you know, there's a whole big state out there that has people living and creating and inventing than never before, and they are isolated and alone. Okay. And there isn't another investor in Vermont as connected as we are with the technical service providers, the hubs we've helped create through the 10 colleges we work with. And that's where I get excited. So
David, why couldn't Vito lend out similar monies like this?
Because they're a lender.
Investor.
And we're an equity investor. It's two different ways altogether.
Yet they started your fund with $4 million, or the majority funds. Did they do that? Were they directed to do that by the legislature, or were they given discretion to do that?
They were directed. It was a pass-through entity. The legislature appropriated 2 buckets of federal ARA monies, right? And then those were substituted for general fund dollars. And so general fund dollars went into the fund just so it could blend well with our money, the $1 million we put in. And then we got down to business, trying to do good.
Let me just ask also, though, that if you were to assume the role of a lender and you loaned money to those entities, is it not correct that that would then make this an unattractive opportunity for other outside investors because of the fact that that entity now had a substantial amount of debt?
Possibly. I mean, you know, I think 75% of the time, yes. You know, I think it'll be a disincentive because, again, there aren't cash flows necessarily in these early days. You know, we sometimes fund companies that are years away from their first revenue. They're creating the future. They're creating patents out of colleges. They're reinventing. So I think debt is appropriate, but you may have had other testimony. There's more debt available than ever before. There's more technical assistance dollars available than ever before. The acute gap is for $50,000 to $100,000 to kick off a seed round, an early outside equity funding that doesn't require cash flow, but also obligates the investors to work hand in hand with the entrepreneurs in their teams, because again, it's a lot more than money.
Okay. David, thank you very much. We may need to have you back as we go forward. We were on a time deadline. I have a 12 o'clock hard stop and I need to do some agenda planning. So thank you again. It's nice to see you, and we will be in touch. Okay.
David, thanks.
Hey, thank you all for hearing me out. I appreciate it, and sort of the couple hundred of other people watching this here. So
And thank you for everything you do, because we're very proud of you.
well, thank you. I'm looking for the next decade here. So thank you. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Committee, if you're still here, Alice and I are going to jump off to do a little planning for next week. And then I have a 12 o'clock phone call. So it's going to be very brief.